Hi, my name is DJ Washington. I am a bird keeper here at the Smithsonian National Zoo and Conservation Biology Institute.
Hello, I'm John Rossi. I'm a touring drummer with a passion for animal conservation. When I'm on the road, I spend as much time as possible visiting zoos, aquariums, and conservation organizations. Now, I want to share those places with you. I'll be talking to keepers, vets, conservationists, anyone who can help me in my mission of connecting my people to animals through their people. Join me on my Rossifari. Hi, hello, how are you? Welcome back to the Rossifari podcast. All right, y'all, so today I am going to be taking you to a facility that for a long time for me was almost mythical. So you've heard me talk a lot, both on a previous episode and on Zoo News, about the Smithsonian National Zoo and Conservation Biology Institute, which is a mouthful. And it turns out that there are two campuses that are each a part of this name and this institute. So what you've got the zoo that's open to the public down in Washington, D.C., and you've already heard one episode from there, and you'll hear more down the road. But then you've also got the other part of the Smithsonian Zoo situation, which is a private campus in Front Royal, Virginia. Now, it used to be open to the public one day a year, and I did go and visit on that day. But that has since ceased, and so now the only way to get to this facility is by being invited. Or, getting hired. And so I'm really excited to be bringing you an episode from there. And this won't be the only one that you hear from there. But there's so much amazing, cool, funky conservation work that is going on at this facility that I just can't help but love it. And walking around there and getting to experience it was such a cool thing. Definitely one of those, oh yeah, we get to have some special moments because of this podcast type of thing. And today we're going to be talking about one of those incredible conservation programs. So you're going to be hearing my interview with DJ Washington, who is a bird keeper, as he mentioned in the intro, but specifically who takes care of loggerhead shrikes, which are a type of bird that is in a lot of trouble in the wild. And you're going to hear all the details about that and what it's like to take care of a population of birds in human care that are actually eligible for release into the wild. It's very cool. And, it's actually, I'll be honest with you, it's a bit of a shorter interview. And part of the reason why is that we went to see the shrikes before going in for the interview, and I just stood there. I mean, they're a super cool bird species, and they were really neat to see, and they're very fast, and you're going to learn about them, and you're going to learn some really cool facts about them today, for sure. But I don't know, man, there's just something about sitting and staring at a population of birds, knowing that they are a big part of the potential future, the hopeful future of an entire species that's breathtaking. And so, it was very cool to get to see that and to get to go to this facility and to get to meet DJ. And I'm really excited to share this whole experience with y'all. So we'll get to that in a minute. But before we do, a couple quick reminders. Make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss any of our Tuesday interview episodes or Friday Zoo News episodes. Make sure you're following along on the socials at Rossifari and at Rossifari Pod on the TikTok machine. And don't forget that you can support the pod for as little as $3 a month by going to patreon.com/Rossifari. So with all of that said, actually, I have one other thing I want to say before we get to the interview, which is just that this is a very cool, very exciting interview, and I in no way want to take attention away from that. But you want to be here in 1 week. Something very special is happening on this podcast in 1 week. That's all I'm going to say about that. So, get listening to this one so that you're all hyped up for something special next week. And with that said, here is my also very special interview with DJ Washington of the Smithsonian's National Zoo and Conservation Biology Institute. We are here specifically to talk about a program that you are involved with, in charge with. I don't know what we're doing, but so let's talk about this program.
Yeah, so my role here on the bird team is looking over the loggerhead shrike that we have here. And it's a program that Smithsonian joined in 2011. It's been going on for several years. The initial program for loggerhead shrike started all the way back in 1992. So it's been in existence for quite a while. So my role here is kind of the primary caretaker of all of those birds. And I also help engaging with a lot of the conversations with our partners. WPC, which stands for Wild Preservation Canada. They're sort of the overarching group that manages the Shrike program and works with a bunch of other partner facilities. So, Nashville Zoo, National Aviary, et cetera. There are tons of other facilities that are involved in this program. But my involvement is helping take care of the birds and also being involved in those conversations for the recovery program for the species. So the birds we have here are pretty unique because we not only get to breed them, they get sent up annually for release into the wild. So
that is fantastic. So let's start off with why we need that. Tell me about these birds and what their conservation situation is right now.
Yeah, so I feel like the loggerhead shrike in and of itself is a little bit of an obscure species. I feel like not many people know about it unless you're a very niche birder. It might not be a species that everyone is familiar with, but they are a member of the shrike family, obviously. Laniidae is the family order name, in case anyone was interested in that. And there are over 34 different species, and only 2 of which are endemic to North America, one being the loggerhead shrike and the other is the northern shrike. So kind of the situation with the loggerhead shrike is that there's a lot that we don't actively know about this bird and that we're still sort of trying to piece together. We know that they've been in decline at least since the 1960s, and it's been at least over 76% of their entire range, which has been pretty drastic. And it's almost sort of been like a very silent decline in the background, again, because they're not a species that's very widely known to a lot of people. And so the big bulk of this project is really helping bring awareness to that species, bringing awareness to the loggerhead shrike, and really trying to counteract that decline. And there are so many things and variables that are just kind of going on with why these birds are kind of disappearing that we're still sort of actively trying to figure out. So it's a very kind of important mission to understand that better and while still actively trying to support the species.
I find it really fascinating that there's been this program that's been around for decades, but there's still so much not known about the bird. Are they particularly elusive, or what is it that causes that?
Yeah, I think I wouldn't say it's necessarily that they're elusive. It's that there haven't been a lot of eyes on them historically to keep track of them. So a big instance, the birds that we keep here, I didn't mention this prior, but the loggerhead shrike is sort of divided into 2 sort of distinct populations. There are residential populations, and then there are migratory populations. So the birds that we work with here are part of that migratory population, which is kind of important context to go back sort of to your question about why we don't know a whole lot. And it's just kind of because there hasn't been a lot of long-term tracking on that migration and understanding where these birds are exactly going. So, for instance, we know that these birds winter in the Northeast on the East Coast here in the U.S., but there's not a lot known about where those birds are exactly going, where they are overwintering, where they're staying, if they're coming back to the same locations. There's so many questions involved with that. And that's just because up to this point, there really hasn't been a lot of people keeping an eye. So we have some understanding of maybe established breeding sites. So we do know that the population that we have here breeds in Ontario, Canada. and they spend the summer up there. But as far as where they come to during the winter down here, we have no idea.
That's weird. That is, how do you lose birds?
Yes.
Like, how does the scientific community lose birds? I'm genuinely fascinated by that. Are there a lot of bird species? Because I'm not a bird guy. I love birds, but I'm not a birder or whatever. Are there a lot of species that we just lose during their migration, like as far as like not knowing where they go and stuff? Or is this a pretty unique thing?
I would say it's also probably pretty prevalent in a lot of other migratory bird species, especially just here in North America. And again, it's not necessarily that the birds are poofing into thin air, but yeah, they're pulling a Houdini. But it's just that there's just not a lot of long-term keeping up with where exactly those movements are. So, you might see them, someone might see them in their backyard one day, they might be gone the next, and who knows where they've gone at that point because there's no one actively sort of tracking them.
Right.
And in and of itself, it's very difficult to track a species like a bird that flies. They don't always leave the obvious signs of where to find them. So yeah, that's kind of a big reason why there's such a huge knowledge gap that we have about where these birds are sort of navigating around their environment.
That is really fascinating, actually. I find that very challenging I find it challenging to picture, honestly, just because there are so many birders out there, like along with the scientific community, like, wow, what an interesting gap in knowledge. But that's something that always amazes me in this world. My wife's a veterinarian, and I'll go to the AAZV conference every year and find out that, like, one species we could tell you, down to every detail about what's going on in their bodies. And then, like, 2 years ago, they were developing a red panda body condition score chart because there wasn't one. How was there not one of those 2 years ago when we have red pandas in, like, every facility, Mm-hmm. It's just all over the place. So that's very interesting. Now, as far as the shrikes that we're talking about here, I don't really know what they are. We went and we saw them, but before that, I had never seen them or don't know that I saw them. And honestly, when Ellie proposed talking to you about this, the image that came into my head, and I know this isn't accurate, but was a bird body with a loggerhead turtle head, which again, I know is not accurate, but can you talk about, like, if people, I mean, obviously you can use the Google machine, but beyond that, what do these look like?
Yeah, so the loggerhead shrike. So I mentioned, I think earlier, that they are kind of part of the shrike family Laniidae. And Laniidae is embedded kind of within Passeriformes. So they belong to the same group that that your typical songbird belongs to, your sparrows, your cardinals, chickadees. But what really makes the loggerhead shrike kind of stand out from the rest of them is they're generally larger than most songbirds. They're probably about robin size. And their coloration is gray they have, I like to call it, a little black Zorro mask almost along their face with a very white underbelly. And unlike most other songbirds, they also have this very large, in their name, they do loggerhead. That is part of the reference. They have a very proportionally large head relative to the rest of their body. Unfortunately, not quite like the loggerhead turtle. Might be a strange image, yeah.
Yeah, no, I was entertained by it, though. So, yeah, no, okay. And then what makes these birds unique? Like, beyond looks, like, personality-wise, like, what are they?
So, yeah, I would say the most interesting part about shrike is not even just their appearance, it's also their behavior. So this species is really well known. They have a common name of being the butcher bird.
Oh.
And the primary reason for that being is that they are a predatory species, so they will eat small vertebrates, mice, lizards, snakes, even other birds.
Wow.
And a variety of different insect species. And the method of how they dispatch their prey is pretty unique in that they will catch their prey, find some sort of fork in a branch or preferably thorns. They do seek out things like honey locust, hawthorn that have these huge thorns on them, and they will impale their prey on those thorns and use that to sort of rip apart their food and eat it.
Wow. All right.
So
these birds are pretty metal, is what I'm hearing.
Very much so.
That's impressive. That yeah, nature, man. It's cruel sometimes,
It's wild.
That is wow. All right. So that's fascinating. And okay, so what ecological niche do they fill? Why are these murder birds important?
Yeah, so they fill a pretty important role. Like I mentioned, unlike, your typical songbirds that, they are going to be eating insects, but, there's not many songbirds out there that are also eating other birds and other small mammals for that mention at least. So the shrike kind of fits that unique role of almost being, I wouldn't say quite on the same level of, say, a raptor, like a hawk or something, but it's in that very similar vein in that they do eat a lot of smaller level prey species. And, on the human side of things, what we can think about with that is, they will go after a lot of pest species. So things that people maybe not want. These birds actually do spend a lot of time near agricultural areas as well. Because I mentioned that they will use thorns, but in the absence of that, they've also been known to use barbed wire.
Amazing.
And that's something that we even emulate in the enclosures we have for our birds here. So they have little strings of barbed wire that they can utilize if they so please.
I just thought that was for the birds that are troublemakers, That's incredible. Wow. Very cool. So, so we did go and we saw the area that they live in here. And so that is your primary, you're there taking care of them, right?
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about this breeding program that you've got here. So how many birds do you have as like breeders here? How big is the setup? Just go into some details about all of that.
We have the capacity to hold 22 birds here at SCBI, NZCBI. And of that, there are 9 breeding pairs currently this year, which is actually the highest that we've had ever.
Nice.
Usually that number is a lot lower. It's usually somewhere between 4 and 6. So in total, that's enough to hold at least 22 adult birds. And then also that's not accounting all of the offspring that then come with that. So this year has been a very productive breeding season, and we have currently 41 chicks.
Yo, that is a large number of chicks.
Yeah. So when you kind of put all that math together, you're looking at about 61 birds in total.
Wow, that's a lot of birds to have to take care of.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Interesting. So they must. What is a normal clutch? Like, how many numbers would a normal clutch be?
Yeah. So usually the clutch, they're pretty variable. But I would say generally the average size is somewhere between 3 and 4.
Okay.
But they can be as large as 6, and in some cases we've had clutches of 7.
Wow.
So. Yeah, it all kind of depends too, because sometimes the more experienced adults are more better equipped to handle larger clutches, where areas inexperienced birds, or if it's their first time breeding, they might handle a smaller clutch. But yeah, that's generally the average sort of size that they can lay.
Okay, very cool. So you take care of these birds, but they have to be ready to be reintroduced into the wild. What challenges does that create for you?
Yeah, so there are a lot of sort of things involved with getting these birds ready for release. And obviously, with having them here and having them as part of that release program, it usually means that we really want to limit any sort of interaction with those birds. So they might not be like your other typical zoo species where, we're as hands-on with them and stuff. Usually the only time we are ever involved in that sort of scenario is whether it's some sort of medical procedure, giving the birds some kind of treatment, or just following up and monitoring them. But yeah, some of the challenges that kind of come with that is really making sure that these birds are displaying all of the behaviors they need to be successful in the wild. So as I mentioned, they have that really notable impaling behavior. And so when we have these chicks born here, it's really important that we expose them to all sorts of different stimulants to get them prepared for that. So we will offer them things like live crickets to sort of give them some sort of live prey option to practice with and get a sort of feel. It's very amusing watching the chicks especially learn early on how to do that impaling behavior. They sometimes will watch from their parents do it, and a lot of it is kind of just them sort of learning on their own. And they might not even start with the live crickets that we offer them. I've seen some of the juveniles like pick up sticks. They'll take leaves and they'll try and stick them in different places. Sometimes with very limited success. Sometimes they'll stick it on a branch where there's absolutely nothing, and it just kind of falls on the ground, and they just kind of stare there, and they're like, "What happened?" So, really, it's sort of ensuring that they have that time to practice those skills. so that hopefully by the time they are sent up for release in the wild, they then have developed that ability to capture live prey. So yeah, and it starts with live crickets, and then eventually it'll progress up to live mice, which is really important for them as well too, because insects are very nutritionally valuable, but also like those vertebrate prey like mice have a lot of nutrients packed in as well that is really important for them to consume.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So what does your day look like when you roll in and you've got to prep for all these birds and all that jazz?
Yeah, so because it's breeding season, obviously, and we have so many birds right now, the biggest part of my day is, so first thing when I walk in is getting everyone's food ready for the morning. So that means laying out so many bowls because everyone has kind of their own unique diets, and those are all sort of reflected based on how many birds are within a clutch, or whether or not they're in a breeding scenario or not. So usually my day is preparing all of those diets, making sure everyone has the proper amount of mealworms, mice thawed, everyone gets their live crickets tossed to them. So that's sort of the first start of the day. And once I have all the bowls prepped, I kind of go out. And then the second part is sort of getting tabs on everybody. And so, with 61 birds, it's a lot to keep track of. But generally what I'm looking for each morning is just making sure everyone's sort of bright, alert, responsive. Everyone's moving around. There's nothing that looks of concern with anybody. Everyone's still there. So yeah, that's kind of my morning routine. And then it's sort of continually monitoring throughout the day. And that can also really vary and fluctuate depending on the scenario. So when these birds were initially being started to be bred, a pretty significant portion of my day was actually just watching the breeding pairs, and making sure that they were showing positive behaviors in follow-up to laying eggs and producing offspring. And most of our juveniles at this point have reached their fledge point, so they've developed all of their semi-adult plumage and have started learning how to fly and move out of the nest. But beforehand, a lot of my time as well was also just spending a pretty decent amount of the day just monitoring all of those chicks and making sure they were reaching all those key development milestones.
Sounds like a lot of spreadsheeting.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh my gosh, my behavioral spreadsheets are insane.
So when you're monitoring them, are you watching on cameras? Are you watching in there? Are you watching from the nifty little hill that we were on? Because not only do they fly fast, really fast, but they have nests and foliage and it seems like it would be tricky to follow all of that.
Absolutely. And that can be a challenge in and of itself. So sort of remedy that, I have different ways that I can sort of do that monitoring. We do have a camera, so I'm able to sort of place that in the enclosures or the enclosure of interest that I'd like to monitor, especially like you mentioned with nests. These birds want to be very secretive about where they're keeping that, because they want to keep those offspring safe. So oftentimes they can be tucked away in a corner that's not readily visible, or it might be hard for me to see from outside the enclosure. So in those instances, I will go in and I'll sort of place a remote camera that we have, and maybe angle it at the right way to look into that area. So that way I can then check remotely on my computer and see what's going on. Or other instances, the most common one is we have a hunting blind. Obviously, we're not using it for that.
I would hope not.
Gosh, yeah. We have kind of a hunting blind that I will sit in, and that kind of allows me to sit in there and watch the birds without readily disturbing them because they're not seeing me.
That's really cool.
And there's a little opening, so I'll be sitting in there with my binoculars, just kind of keeping track. And especially if we have birds nesting, even if I can't readily see into the nest, I might stay there long enough to see if maybe there's movement, if the parents are going to a spot with food, and maybe I can guess and be like, oh, well, they seem to be bringing a lot of worms over there, so maybe there's a nest in that location. So that's one other way. And then also, as we saw when we walked, sometimes I will also stand on that hill and also usually sit in that blind with my binoculars as well. And that allows me just to watch them from a little bit of a farther distance. because it can vary depending on pair, because some birds are a little more suspicious than others, and they will notice when there's something strange. So they'll be like, there wasn't a hunting blind here earlier. So standing on the hill allows me to get a little bit of a farther vantage point, so maybe they're a little less conspicuous about what's going on.
Sure. So how did you become an expert in these weird disappearing Houdini birds?
Yeah, so I feel like for me, it's actually been a pretty recent journey. So I started here just this year, actually.
Okay.
So I had previously had a lot of intern experience working here at NZSCBI and the campus in DC at the zoo. And I'd always had a huge interest in birds. Birds have always been something that have kind of fascinated me. And even in that fascination, I kind of had an early exposure to shrike. I knew at least about that very novel impaling behavior. But having since started here, it's been such a huge journey in just understanding so much more about them and really what we don't know about them, because, there's so much that is missing about their ecology that is still sort of actively being understood. Where these birds are migrating, what are their habitat suitability preferences. So it's all kind of just come with the exposure of starting here and just really learning the ropes of everything.
When you took the job out here, was it specifically to work with shrike?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you were just like, I don't really know these birds, but I'm going to dedicate my life to saving them.
Absolutely.
That's what I'm hearing. Yes. Nice. That's cool. That's cool. I like that. So what has that been like for you as you've come to know them and learn about them and become an expert in them and all that jazz?
It's been really great and it's been really rewarding. I mean, working with these species, I feel like I feel very privileged to get to work in a program where, we're not just managing the species and breeding them, but also to have them, by that further extension, be part of an active release program. Right. It's amazing to know that, like, every year these birds are sort of I get to, follow their journey from egg to chick to fledgling, and then eventually get to see them sent off. So
into the wild where they disappear.
Yes. So yeah, it's been really rewarding in that sense to get exposure to a program like this and work with a species that is part of an active release program and see all those steps. And working with the species just in general has kind of exposed me to so much. I mean, even when I monitor the birds, I notice so many interesting things about the behaviors they kind of engage in. And it just really gets all sort of the quirks in my brain wiring, thinking about what's going on. And just the more I actively kind of do my own research and read up on the species, I find out things that I didn't even know about. So yeah, I mean, it's a species that I didn't necessarily start this job saying, like, loggerhead shrike, that is the one. But it's a species that I've really grown to appreciate and really enjoy. And I think, honestly, they might arguably be one of my favorite birds now.
Wow, that's very cool. So you talk about the ability to re-release these birds or to release these birds into the wild. We've talked a lot about what goes into preparing them for that here, but what are the next steps? What happens when you're like, cool, wild ready, go? Do you just open the cage and hope for the best, or?
Yeah, so unfortunately, it's not that simple.
Okay.
I think in everyone's mind, it would be great if, any sort of release program was that straightforward.
Seriously.
But yeah, usually from that point on, once the birds are sent up to Ontario, Canada, they're taken to a release site. And that process is also something in and of itself. So those birds will usually spend time in what's called a release pen. And they'll stay in there for at least a few weeks, just so they can acclimate to their new environment. They can be continually monitored. So our partners in Canada will partake in that. And they will also take any sort of necessary samples they might need. And that can be helpful for genetic research applications, because that's another field that is sort of being actively pioneered in understanding everything about this species. And the important thing, as I've mentioned, there's that huge knowledge gap about where these birds are going. So a big thing, too, when they're being prepped for release is also making sure they are banded. So all of the birds we have here are banded, and those ID markers are usually just to tell us within this facility what we have. But when they are sent to those release sites, they are given a special metal band from U.S. Fish and Wildlife. And what that basically enables is that it allows access to long-term monitoring, so that if other people are seeing those birds, it can sort of be cataloged to be like, okay, this bird was seen on this date and reported, and then was seen so-and-so weeks later, so months later. But yeah, so they will spend a few weeks in those release pens sort of like conditioning. They'll also get further practice with that live prey that I've mentioned before to sort of make sure they're ready. And then from that point, usually they'll open those gates, and they'll allow the birds to come back and forth if they choose to come back to get more food. But the eventual hope is that, and usually what happens is progressively they start venturing out more and more until the point that they're ready to go and they are on their way.
Very cool. And what happens if a bird is deemed not ready to go, either up there or even here?
Yeah, so that is the case sometimes, and usually in the instances where a bird is not deemed for release, they may be retained here to stay within the captive population and continue that breeding program. And so that's really kind of the biggest thing that we do sometimes for birds that are non-releasable. Or if we keep a bird here and maybe we might not have immediate space for that bird, we might transfer it to another partner facility that we work with. So yeah, that's kind of the big one. Occasionally, it's not very common with this species because we are very heavily focused on having them part of that release program. But we do have one program bird. She was hand-reared. Her name is Barb.
Oh my, Barb.
And so she was kind of a case of a bird that was not releasable because she was hand-reared and had that human exposure. But that was sort of with the intent of hopefully making her a program animal that can be used for educational purposes. So yeah, those are sort of the different avenues that if birds are not sent for release, they can either be program birds, but more often than not, they're sort of retained and kept within the breeding population.
Makes sense. So what's Barb up to?
What is Barb not up to? She is a very personable bird to work with, obviously, because she's been so hand-reared. And we're still kind of actively working on getting her up to that point to being kind of a program animal. It's something that has kind of not been of immediate focus recently, but it's still something that I try to work with her every day. So right now during breeding season, it's a little challenging, but in the off season, usually what I'll try to do is do a little bit of training with her, sort of teaching her to get more comfortable to be around people, with the eventual hope that maybe she can be used to do public education programs and teach people about shrike.
Right. Very cool. Does she live in the building here? Does she have one of the outdoor areas? What's her deal?
Yeah, so she has her own outdoor enclosure. Nice. Adjacent to all of the other shrike.
Nice. Very cool. So you had mentioned to me while we were out there that all of the birds live outside, like always, which I guess makes sense because they're going to be released into the wild, which is also outside.
Yes.
But I'm curious, like, does that create any, I mean, we've talked a lot about what goes into the husbandry and the observation and stuff, but is there anything else to that just having, because I'm so used to birds, I'm so used to every animal having inside access. Mm-hmm. You know, we say that every week on this podcast. And so I'm just curious if there's anything else to that.
I mean, not really. I mean, the whole reason we just kind of keep them outside is because they are being released into the wild, you know, it's important to have them exposed to those sort of similar conditions that they're going to see. But they are a pretty hardy species in general, so they're pretty resilient in the winter. And we kind of sort of, I guess in some ways, based on those seasonal changes, because obviously here in Front Royal, Virginia, it can get very snowy in the winter. And that's something that they will be exposed to once they are out in the wild. And what that can also mean is sort of differences in their diet. So generally during the warmer months, so right now, a huge portion of their diet is insect prey. But during the winter, they might eat more mammalian prey because those insects obviously are not going to be as available to them. And so we kind of emulate that in here in the captive scenario. because in winter we give them a lot more mice proportional to their insect load in the winter. So again, it's kind of exposing them to those conditions that they will see in the wild. But also, again, emulating those things. So like even that resource availability that they'll be experiencing.
Very cool. And is there anything else that you want to say about this program or like tell the public in general about this and the work that you do?
I feel like if there was one thing I could really tell anybody is just knowing about the species itself and its existence, because I feel like, again, like so many people just don't know about this bird and let alone don't know about what's going on. So I feel like if I have any message to share, it's to kind of know that there is a program that exists to help this bird. And that, there are just ways that even everyday people can become involved and help with that. I mentioned about that banding that often goes on when these birds are released. And we've actually had several instances where kind of citizen science has come in and really helped with that long-term monitoring. So earlier this year, actually, we had 2 sightings. One was in, I believe, December, and the other was later in February. One was in Caroline County, Maryland, and the other was in Manassas, Virginia.
Nice.
And they were from local birding groups that came across loggerhead shrike through talks on different forums, Facebook groups, eBird, all of those big things. And they were able to report those shrikes back to our partners at WPC, Wild Preservation Canada. And then they confirmed with us that those birds had come from NZSCBI. So it was kind of a really cool instance of people being able to be part of that process of that tracking and then know where those birds are following their release.
Right. That's really neat. Yeah, I like that a lot. I'm a big fan of citizen science stuff. I think that's very cool. Cool. And then it is time. It's time now, don't you know? We've come to the end of the show. But there's one tale left to go. You're gonna laugh and say, oh no. It's time for the Rossifari poop story.
All right. I can't say it. I don't know if I have too many shrike-related poop stories.
That's okay.
Yet.
They can be anything, just career-wise.
Does it have to be poop?
No, anything gross. Anything gross. There's lots of them.
It's not quite shrike-related, but I do very vividly remember a memory of my own when I was an intern at the carnivore unit in D.C. at the zoo. I worked with the lions and tigers, and I vividly remember it was like I want to say it was my first or second week of starting. And I was watching sort of the keepers assist in letting the lions out for the day. They have 2 males there. The names are Shaka and Jumbe, these males. And yeah, we were letting them out for the yard for the day. And I was watching them kind of walk through their little chute into their outdoor space. And I turned my head for one moment to look away at something and had not realized that one of them was standing in front of me, lifted his tail, and just completely sprayed like the left side. Yeah.
Oh.
So that was a very unique experience, I will say for sure.
Sounds like the right word. Yeah.
And I'm sure anyone that has cats at home will know that cat urine is very strong. Lion urine is even stronger. So it was a very interesting experience going home that day, trying desperately to wash out that poor shirt. I think I ended up having to throw it out. I think I washed it like 4 or 5 times. And could not get that smell out. But yeah, that's kind of stuck with me as a very core gross moment.
That's incredible. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I appreciate it.
Of course, absolutely.
So there you have it, folks. Look behind the curtain at the Front Royal campus of the Smithsonian's National Zoo and Conservation Biology Institute. I find the whole thing so cool. Just such impressive work there. It's so neat to get to share these stories. And honestly, there are so many more to share. Not just the ones I've recorded already, but just so they do so much at this place. It's astonishing, and I'm so excited to have this relationship with the Smithsonian now, and we're going to keep sharing these cool stories with y'all, so you can look forward to that. Before we get going, I want to take a moment to thank you all for listening and to thank my patrons, especially my Red Panda level patrons, Dr. Laura Schenk, Dr. Stephen Williamson, Barbara Bennett, Jenny Owens, Melissa Reed, Carrie Kirkpatrick, John Lewis, who is also here for stickers, and Kevin Williams. And then just a friendly reminder again that in 1 week, something very cool is going to happen on this podcast. Can't wait to share it with y'all. So make sure you're back here on Friday for Zoo News, and then on Tuesday for a very special episode of Rossifari. And until then, remember, friends, the word credits backwards is Steiderk. The Rossifari podcast is produced, hosted, and engineered by John Rossi. Editing and fact-checking by John and Dr. Zoe Rossi. Our theme song is Sevens by Nathan Burke, performed by Nathan and John. Interrupting John theme and additional voices by Taylor Isaac Gray. You can reach John directly on Instagram and Facebook at Rossifari or by email at rossifaripod@gmail.com. Rossifari is part of the Daydreamer Media Network. Now, stop listening to me and go visit a zoo.